What defines a person's worth? Is it the job they hold, the clothes they wear, or the balance in their bank account? For Nathaniel Harrington, a man who could buy entire city blocks on a whim, the answer had always been success. Until one rainy night in the forgotten corner of a city he owned, he saw a ghost from his past. A face he hadn't seen since high school, now etched with a weariness that chilled him to the bone. She was a waitress, her hands scarred by work, her dreams seemingly washed away. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry. And as he sat there in the shadows of a greasy spoon diner, he was faced with a choice that would unravel a past he thought he understood, and set in motion a chain of events so dramatic, so twisted it would threaten to destroy them both. What he did next wasn't just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of a storm. The rain fell on Seattle with a vengeance, not the gentle mist the city was famous for, but a hard, percussive drumming that seemed to wash the color from the world. From his penthouse apartment on the 58th floor of the new Rainier Summit Tower, Nathaniel Harrington watched the city dissolve into a watercolor blur of neon and asphalt. Below, the world scurried and hustled, but up here there was only the sound of the rain and the sterile hum of the climate control. At 32, Nate was the architect of his own gilded cage. His company Synapse Dynamics had revolutionized data compression, making him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He had everything a man could want, a portfolio that dwarfed the GDP of small nations, a collection of vintage cars he never drove, and a Rolodex filled with the most powerful names in technology and finance. What he didn't have was an appetite for the charity gala he was supposed to be attending. The thought of another night of forced smiles, vapid conversations, and lukewarm champagne made his stomach churn more than the turbulent stock market ever could. He loosened the knot of his Tom Ford tie, the silk feeling like a noose. "Cancel my appearance at the fundraiser, Jessica," he said into his phone, his voice flat. "Tell them. A sudden international conference call. Something unavoidable." On the other end, his ever-efficient assistant didn't miss a beat. "Of course, Mr. Harrington. Shall I have Chef Antoine's prepare you something here?" "No," Nate said, a sudden, strange impulse taking hold. "No, I think I'll get something myself." The silence on the other end was more telling than any question. Nathaniel Harrington did not get something himself. He hadn't set foot in a grocery store in 5 years. He shrugged off his tailored suit jacket, replacing it with a simple black rain slicker he'd had since college. He grabbed a plain baseball cap and left his wallet, taking only a few $100 bills from a desk drawer. He wanted to be anonymous, a ghost in his own city. The elevator descended 58 floors in a whisper of polished steel and silence. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and passive-aggressive floral arrangements. The doorman, a stoic man named George, rushed forward with a ridiculously large umbrella. "Mr. Harrington, your car is waiting." "Not tonight, George," Nate said, pulling the cap down. "I'm walking." He stepped out into the deluge before George could protest, the shock of the cold, wet air, a welcome slap in the face. He walked without direction, letting the rain soak his jeans, the water seeping into his expensive leather shoes. He passed Michelin-starred restaurants, with valets huddled under awnings, trendy bars pulsing with music and laughter, and theaters spilling well-dressed patrons onto the wet pavement. None of it appealed to him. He turned down a side street, then another, the towering glass and steel of the financial district, giving way to older brick buildings with faded signs. It was here, tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up bookstore, that he saw it, the Corner Spoon. The sign was a flickering neon disaster, the R in corner having given up the ghost years ago. Steam clouded the large front windows, promising warmth and refuge from the storm. It was the kind of place he and his dad used to go to on Saturday mornings a lifetime ago. On impulse, he pushed the door open. A small bell chimed, announcing his arrival. The air was thick with the smell of frying bacon, old coffee, and damp wool. A few patrons were scattered in the worn vinyl booths, a couple of grizzled truck drivers, a young student hunched over a laptop, and an elderly woman nursing a cup of tea. It was perfect. Anonymous. He slid into a booth in the back, the cracked red vinyl sighing under his weight. He picked up the plastic-coated menu, the corners soft with use. The prices were from another era. He could buy the entire diner's inventory for the week with the cash in his pocket. "Be with you in a sec, Hon," a voice called out from behind the counter. Nate looked up, and the world stopped. The voice belonged to a waitress who was deftly clearing a table, her movements efficient and practiced, despite the clear exhaustion in her posture. She wore a simple, slightly too large black polo shirt with the diner's logo embroidered on it, and her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a messy but functional ponytail. Strands of it had escaped, clinging to her temples. But it was her face. He would know that face anywhere. It was thinner, the cheekbones more pronounced, and there were faint lines of worry around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But the eyes themselves, a startling shade of green, were the same. The determined set of her jaw was the same. It was Adele Bennett. A flood of memories so potent they were almost dizzying crashed over him. Northwood High School, class of 2011. Adele Bennett wasn't just some girl from his past. She had been his benchmark, his rival, his shadow. In AP Physics, they'd battled for the top grade. In debate club, they'd been formidable partners and even fiercer opponents. She was brilliant with a razor-sharp wit and an artistic soul that seemed at odds with her analytical mind. While he was a math and science prodigy, she was a true polymath acing calculus while sketching masterpieces in the margins of her notebook. He remembered her dreams. She was going to go to the Rhode Island School of Design, ISD, become a world-renowned painter or a graphic designer who would change the face of advertising. She spoke of art with a passion that both intimidated and fascinated him. There had been an unspoken current between them, a magnetic pull of two minds operating on a similar frequency. He'd even, in a moment of uncharacteristic boldness, almost asked her to senior prom. But he'd chickened out, intimidated by her fire, and the moment passed, lost to the annals of teenage cowardice. And now here she was, in a greasy spoon diner, her hands, which he remembered holding fine-tipped charcoals and delicate paintbrushes, now gripping dirty plates. The artist who was supposed to take the world by storm was asking a trucker if he wanted a coffee refill. She turned her eyes, scanning the room, and for a terrifying second, they met his. He quickly looked down at his menu, his heart pounding like a drum. Did she recognize him? He risked a glance up. No. Her gaze had already moved on her expression, a mask of professional neutrality. Of course she didn't recognize him. He was just another customer, a shadow in a dark booth. The awkward, lanky tech geek from high school was gone, replaced by a man forged in boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. He looked different. He was different. She approached his table, a small notepad in her hand. "Sorry about the wait. What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice, tired but kind. Up close, he could see the reality of her situation more clearly. The faint smudges of dark circles under her eyes, the small pale scar on her forearm, probably from a burn from the grill. Her fingernails were clean but cut short, practical. A wave of something he couldn't name, anger, pity, profound sadness washed over him. This was wrong. This was a cosmic injustice. "Coffee," he managed to say, his voice rougher than he intended. Black. Coming right up, she said, scribbling it down without looking at him again, before turning on her heel and heading back to the counter. He watched her go, his mind a maelstrom of questions. What happened? What happened to Rizd? What happened to the fire, the dreams, the unstoppable force that was Adele Bennett? He stayed for over an hour, nursing the same cup of bitter coffee. He watched her. He saw the way she gave the elderly woman a free slice of pie, whispering, "Don't you worry about it, Martha." He saw the way her smile, though tired, was genuine when she bantered with the truckers. And he saw something else. The manager, a portly man with a sweaty brow and a name tag that read Peterson, came out from the back office. He cornered Adele near the coffee machines, his proximity just a little too close for comfort. Nate couldn't hear what was said, but he could see the body language. Peterson's smug leer, the way his eyes roamed over her. Adele's subtle but firm lean away, her jaw tightening her face, becoming a stony mask. She said something short and clipped, then brushed past him to grab a fresh pot of coffee. Peterson watched her walk away, a nasty smirk on his face. Rage cold and pure, unlike any he'd felt in a corporate takeover, pulsed through Nate's veins. The sight of that man disrespecting her, of Adele having to endure that indignity just to earn a living, was more than he could bear. This was not a situation for a simple handout. Throwing money at this would be an insult to the proud girl he remembered. It wouldn't fix the root problem, and it wouldn't restore her dignity. No, this required something else. A plan. When Adele brought the check, he placed $200 bills on the table. It was far too much, but it was all he had. She saw the money and her eyes widened slightly. "Sir, I can't break this." "It's not for me," he said, keeping his voice low and his face angled down. "It's for you, and for Martha's pie." Before she could protest, he slid out of the booth and walked towards the door. His cap pulled low. "So wait," she called after him. He didn't turn around. He pushed the door open and stepped back into the relentless Seattle rain, the diner's bell chiming his departure. He wasn't just a ghost anymore. He was a man with a mission. The puzzle of Adele Bennett's fallen star was one he was going to solve. And as for Mr. Peterson, Nate made a quiet, chilling promise to himself. The man's day of reckoning was coming. Sleep was a stranger to Nathaniel Harrington that night. The sterile silence of his penthouse felt oppressive, the panoramic view of the city lights mocking him. The image of Adele's tired face was seared into his mind, a stark contrast to the vibrant, ambitious girl he remembered. The girl who had once, during a particularly heated debate about astrophysics, called him a beautiful but soulless calculator. He'd been offended at the time, but now, surrounded by his beautiful soulless possessions, the insult felt more like a prophecy. By 5 a.m. he was in his home office, the city still cloaked in darkness. He wasn't a man who left things to chance. He hadn't built Synapse Dynamics on impulse. He'd built it on data, on understanding every variable. He needed to understand Adele's story, all of it. He made a call to a number not listed in any directory. "Arthur, it's Nate." Arthur Gable was a man who moved in the shadows. Officially, a risk management consultant. He was in reality the most discreet and effective private investigator on the West Coast. He had handled sensitive corporate espionage cases and delicate personal matters for Nate for years, always with surgical precision and absolute confidentiality. "Nate, it's early even for you." Arthur's gravelly voice came through the encrypted line. "Let me guess. A hostile takeover attempt from a rival in Shanghai. Something more important," Nate said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I need a full, comprehensive, and utterly discreet background file on an individual. Adele Bennett, Bennett, approximately 32 years old, graduated Northwood High Class of 2011, last known employment, a waitress at the Corner Spoon Diner on Pike Street. There was a pause. Arthur was likely surprised by the nature of the request. He was used to investigating corporate titans, not waitresses. Discreet is my middle name. What am I looking for? Everything, Nate commanded. I want to know what happened to her after high school. University records, family status, financial history, medical records if you can get them legally. I want to know why a student who was accepted to RISDA on a full scholarship is serving coffee in a dive. I want to know about her family, her parents, any siblings, and Arthur. Be gentle. This is not a hostile subject. This is delicate. Understood, Arthur said. You'll have a preliminary report by end of day. The day was a blur of meetings Nate barely registered. He feigned interest in quarterly projections and marketing strategies, his mind miles away in a greasy spoon diner. His team noticed his distraction. Questions were asked. Was he feeling all right? Was there trouble with the board? He brushed them off with practiced ease, but inside a tectonic shift was occurring. For the first time in a decade, something mattered more than synapse dynamics. True to his word, at precisely 5 p.m., a secure file appeared in Nate's private inbox. The subject line was simple: Report on C. Bennett. Nate dismissed his last meeting and locked his office door. He poured himself a glass of water, his hand not quite steady, and opened the file. What he read methodically dismantled his understanding of the world. It was a story not of failure, but of sacrifice. The report began as he expected. Adele had indeed been accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design, with a prestigious academic and arts scholarship. Her portfolio was described in the admissions notes as prodigious and singularly brilliant. She had attended for 1 semester. Her grades were immaculate. Then the story turned. In the middle of her 2nd semester, her father, David Bennett, a mild-mannered architect, had been diagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a rare degenerative nerve disorder. It was aggressive. Within months, he was unable to work. The family's health insurance, a standard policy, had a laughably low lifetime cap for such chronic conditions. The costs were astronomical. Specialist visits, physical therapy, experimental treatments. They drained the family's savings, then their retirement funds, then the equity in their home. Adele had tried to stay at RISD, taking on part-time jobs, but the distance and the mounting stress were too much. The report included a copy of her withdrawal letter to the university. It was brief, formal, and heartbreaking in its simplicity. Due to a severe family medical emergency, I am forced to withdraw my attendance indefinitely. She had come home to Seattle to become a caregiver. She had a younger brother, Liam, who was in high school at the time. Adele had taken on the burden of the entire family. The report detailed a string of jobs: barista office temp retail clerk, and finally the 2 jobs she was currently working: mornings at a dry cleaner and nights at the Corner Spoon. She worked nearly 80 hours a week. Their family home had been sold. They now lived in a small rented apartment in a less than savory part of town. Every dollar she earned went towards her father's care and Liam's education. The report noted that Liam had just recently graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in computer science, debt-free thanks to his sister. She had sacrificed her future for his. Tears pricked at Nate's eyes. Hot, angry tears, the sheer crushing injustice of it all. The world had taken the most vibrant person he had ever known and tried to grind her into dust. But she hadn't broken. She had bent, she had sacrificed, but she had not broken. She had shielded her family with her own body, taking every blow. The report also contained a section on the manager, Gregory Peterson. It was ugly. A string of complaints from former female employees, all settled quietly by the diner's owner to avoid trouble. Harassment, wage theft, verbal abuse. He was a small tyrant in a small kingdom, preying on those with no other options. Nate closed the file, a cold, hard resolve solidifying in his chest. His initial plan had been to help her. Now his plan was to restore her. He needed to give her back the life that had been stolen from her. But how a direct cash infusion was still off the table. He knew the Adele from high school would have been mortified. The woman she was now forged in the crucible of hardship and sacrifice would be downright insulted. Pride was likely the only thing she had left, and he wouldn't be the one to take it from her. He paced his office, the city lights beginning to glitter outside. He needed to offer her not a handout, but a hand up. An opportunity so perfectly tailored to her, so undeniably legitimate, that her pride would allow her to accept it. He thought back to her art, the sketches she used to make. They were more than just pretty pictures. They were designs, concepts. She had a unique ability to visualize abstract ideas. She didn't just draw people, she drew emotions, systems ideas. An idea sparked. It was audacious, unconventional, but it just might work. Synapse Dynamics had a philanthropic arm, the Synapse Foundation, which he'd funded but largely ignored. It supported STEM education and tech startups in underserved communities. It was worthy, but it lacked a soul. It had no visual identity, no brand, no story. It was much like him, a beautiful but soulless calculator. He picked up his phone and called the director of the foundation, a sharp woman named Dr. Alani Reyes. Dr. Reyes Nate Harrington. I'm restructuring the foundation's public outreach. We're launching a new initiative focused on the intersection of art and technology. I want a complete visual rebranding, new logo, new design language, new narrative. I'm creating a new position to lead it, lead concept artist and brand strategist. That's sudden Mr. Harrington, Dr. Reyes said, clearly taken aback. Do you have a candidate in mind? We'd normally go through a lengthy search process with a top agency. I have the only candidate in mind, Nate said firmly. I've discovered an artist, an independent. Her early work showed incredible promise, and I believe her unique life experience will give the foundation the authenticity it's been lacking. Her name is Adele Bennett. I want you to prepare an offer, a generous one. 6-figure salary full executive benefits package, including our top-tier family medical plan, relocation assistance, a signing bonus, the works. Mr. Harrington, with all due respect, to offer that package to an unknown. She is not an unknown to me. Nate cut in his voice, leaving no room for negotiation. This is not a debate. Find any old online portfolios of hers you can, GeoCities MySpace, whatever you can dig up from a decade ago. Use that as the official discovery pretense. I will handle the initial approach myself. Just have the offer letter ready to go by tomorrow morning. He hung up the phone. The plan was in motion. He would approach her not as Nate Harrington, the billionaire ghost from her past, but as Nate Harrington, the CEO of Synapse Dynamics, who had, by a stroke of luck, stumbled upon her forgotten talent. It was a lie, a carefully constructed fiction, but it was a lie in the service of a greater truth, restoring a brilliant artist to her rightful place. And as for Mr. Peterson, Nate made one more call. This one was to his chief legal counsel. David, he said, his voice dropping to an icy calm. I want you to look into the owner of a diner called the Corner Spoon. Find every health code violation, every labor law infringement, every skeleton in his closet. I want to buy the building his diner is in, and I want to find grounds to terminate his lease immediately. The game was afoot. And Nathaniel Harrington never played to lose. 2 days later, the rain had returned to Seattle, a persistent drizzle that mirrored the nervous flutter in Nate's chest. He sat in his car, a nondescript Audi, not the ostentatious McLaren he usually drove across the street from the Corner Spoon. He'd timed his arrival for the lull between the dinner rush and the late-night crowd. The diner was half empty. Through the steamy window he could see Adele moving with a familiar, weary grace, a solitary figure keeping the small world of the diner turning. In his briefcase on the passenger seat was a file. It contained a meticulously prepared employment offer from the Synapse Foundation and a printout of some of Adele's old digital art he'd had Arthur Gable dig up from the depths of the internet. It was the centerpiece of his carefully constructed lie. This wasn't a rescue mission from a high school friend. It was a professional recruitment. That's what he had to keep telling himself. Taking a deep breath, he got out of the car and crossed the street, the cold mist clinging to his jacket. The bell above the door chimed the sound now freighted with significance. Adele was wiping down the counter, her back to him. She didn't turn around. "Find a seat anywhere. I'll be right with you." "Actually," Nate said, his voice steadier than he felt, "I was hoping to speak with you specifically, Ms. Bennett." At the sound of his voice and her formal name, she froze. Slowly she turned around. Her green eyes widened, the professional mask dropping to reveal pure, unadulterated shock. Recognition dawned, followed by a complex storm of other emotions, confusion, suspicion, and a deep, painful-looking embarrassment. She instinctively wiped her hands on her apron, a gesture of profound self-consciousness. "Nate Nathaniel Harrington." She breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Adele," he said, offering a small, cautious smile. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, a decade. And a few $1 billion from what I hear," she said, a flicker of her old, sharp wit surfacing before she immediately seemed to regret it. Her posture stiffened. "Look, if this is about the other night, the tip, you really didn't have to. It was too much." "It's not about that," he said quickly. "And it was the least I could do." "May I sit down? This isn't really a conversation to have standing in the middle of a diner." She hesitated, her eyes darting around the near-empty room as if looking for an escape route. She was cornered. Finally, she gave a curt nod towards the booth he had occupied before. "Fine. 5 minutes. I'm on the clock." He slid into one side of the booth, placing his briefcase on the vinyl beside him. She slid into the opposite side, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. The air crackled with a tension that was part old history, part new mystery. "So," she began, her voice brittle, "to what do I owe the honor? Did you get a sudden craving for coffee that costs less than a parking space?" The sarcasm was a shield, and he could see the vulnerability it was protecting. He decided to meet it head-on, but gently. "I remember a time you told me my taste was tragically underdeveloped. I see you still hold that opinion." A flicker of surprise in her eyes. She remembered saying that. "I was a teenager. I was an idiot." "You were brilliant," he corrected her softly. "You were the smartest person at Northwood, and you know it." The compliment seemed to throw her off balance. She looked away towards the rain-streaked window. "A lot of good it did me. Look, Nate, I appreciate the trip down memory lane, but I'm working. What do you want?" This was it. He opened the briefcase. "I'm here on business, Adele. My business." He slid the folder across the table. "My company's philanthropic arm, the Synapse Foundation, is undergoing a major rebranding. We're looking for a new perspective, something authentic and human, to connect our tech-focused mission to the real world. Someone in our HR department doing a deep dive for local talent found an old online portfolio of yours. It was impressive. She stared at the folder as if it were a snake. She didn't touch it. A portfolio I haven't updated anything in 10 years. What could they possibly have found? Your work from the RISD application, he said, leaning into the fiction. The Metamorphosis series. The charcoal studies of cityscapes. It was raw, but the vision, it's exactly what the Foundation is missing. Her face paled. She was looking at him now with intense suspicion. That's impossible. No one would be looking at that. It's buried. The internet never forgets, he said, with a shrug, hoping it sounded casual. Adele, we're creating a new role. Lead concept artist. The job would be to build the Foundation's visual identity from the ground up. It's a senior position. It comes with a substantial salary, full benefits for you and your family, and complete creative freedom. She finally looked down and opened the folder. She saw the official offer letter on Synapse Dynamics, letterhead the salary figure, printed in stark black and white. Her eyes widened, and she let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. It was the sound of disbelief. This is a joke, she said, pushing the folder back towards him. This is a pity offer, Nate. This is you, the billionaire, trying to save the poor girl from his past. I don't want your charity. Her voice was shaking a mixture of pride and fury. It's not charity, he insisted, leaning forward, his voice earnest. It's a real job. I saw your work. I remembered your talent, and I realized you're the perfect person for it. The salary is commensurate with the role. The benefits are standard for a senior executive at my company. This is not a handout. Why me? She shot back, her green eyes flashing with fire. It was the first time he'd seen the girl from high school, the debater, the fighter. There are thousands of artists in Seattle, artists with degrees and recent portfolios and connections. Why me, a waitress who hasn't picked up a piece of charcoal in years? He knew this was the critical moment. The lie had taken him as far as it could. He needed to give her a piece of the truth, a different truth. Because I owe you, he said quietly. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion. You owe me for what? He took a breath. The Harrison Grant. The name hung in the air between them, a ghost from a shared past. The Harrison Grant was the most prestigious full-ride scholarship awarded at their high school, a golden ticket to any university in the country. They had been the two finalists. He had won. He remembered seeing her face in the auditorium when they announced his name, the brief, devastating flash of disappointment before she'd schooled her features into a polite smile and clapped for him. They had barely spoken after that. What about it? She asked, her voice low and guarded. I know you think I won it just because my grades in math and science were a fraction of a point higher, he said. But there was an essay component and a review of financial need. I never told anyone this, Adele, but my family was struggling back then. My dad's business had taken a huge hit. We were close to losing our house. I needed that scholarship. I needed it. When I wrote that essay, I wasn't just writing about my ambitions. I was writing to save my family. And when I won, I felt so guilty. Because I knew you were more brilliant, more well-rounded. I knew you deserved it just as much, if not more. I was just more desperate. He looked her straight in the eye, letting her see the unvarnished truth and shame he'd carried for years. This isn't charity for what you are now. It's a correction, an attempt to balance the scales for something that happened a long time ago. This job is real. The need is real. And the person I need to fill it is a brilliant artist with a deep understanding of what it means to struggle. That's you, Adele. She stared at him, her defensive walls visibly crumbling. The anger in her eyes was replaced by a dawning understanding, a re-evaluation of a hurt she had carried for over a decade. Just then, the door to the kitchen swung open. "Bennett, table 4 needs a check and the coffee's low." Mr. Peterson barked, wiping his greasy hands on his apron. He glanced at Nate, his eyes narrowing. "You got a problem here? This guy bothering you?" Adele visibly flinched at his tone. Before she could answer, Nate stood up, his full height seeming to diminish the portly manager. He exuded an aura of calm, lethal authority that he usually reserved for hostile boardrooms. "There is no problem," Nate said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable weight of command. "Ms. Bennett and I are concluding a business meeting, her last as it happens. She is considering a new position with my company, and I believe she'll be accepting it." Peterson scoffed. "A new position? Doing what, cleaning your mansion?" Nate gave a thin, cold smile. "She will be earning more in a month than you make in a year. And I would choose your next words very, very carefully. Because while you may manage this diner, I happen to own the building it's in. And I've just been made aware of some deeply concerning reports about your management style. The lease, I believe, has a morality clause." Peterson's face went from ruddy to ghostly white. He looked from Nate's expensive watch to his immaculately tailored jacket, the reality of who he was talking to finally dawning on him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, sputtering like a fish out of water. Nate turned his back on the manager, his attention returning fully to Adele. She was looking at him with wide, astonished eyes. He had not only offered her a lifeline, he had slain a dragon for her right there in the middle of her weary kingdom. "Come for an interview tomorrow," he said softly, his voice once again gentle. "Meet the Foundation's director. See the offices. No commitment, just see what this life could be. The one you were always supposed to have." He slid the folder back to her side of the table. "The offer stands. I hope I'll see you tomorrow, Adele." He turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Adele Bennett sitting in the booth, the offer letter in her hands, her world irrevocably and terrifyingly changed. In front of her was not a charity case, but a choice. A door to a past she thought was dead, and a future she had never dared to dream of. The Synapse Dynamics headquarters was not a building, it was a statement. A gleaming shard of glass and steel that pierced the Seattle skyline, it was a monument to ambition and success. When Adele Bennett stepped into the lobby the next day, dressed in the one good blazer she owned, she felt like an ant entering a cathedral. The sheer scale of it was designed to intimidate, to make one feel small and insignificant. And it was working. A calm, impeccably dressed woman with an iPad greeted her before she even reached the reception desk. "Ms. Bennett, welcome to Synapse Dynamics. Mr. Harrington is expecting you. Dr. Reyes will meet you on the 48th floor." The elevator ride was silent and impossibly fast, her ears popping as she ascended. The 48th floor was the home of the Synapse Foundation. Unlike the cold corporate lobby, this space was different. It was warmer, with wood accents, living plant walls, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. It was a space waiting for a soul. Dr. Alani Reyes was a formidable woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a warm, genuine smile that immediately put Adele at ease. There was no interview. Dr. Reyes treated her acceptance as a foregone conclusion. She gave Adele a tour, speaking with passion about the Foundation's goals and the desperate need for the very human touch that Nate had mentioned. "Nate, Mr. Harrington has an uncanny ability to see potential others miss," Dr. Reyes said, as they stood before a blank white wall in what would be Adele's office. "He was very clear you have the vision for this space, this entire brand. It's a blank canvas. Your canvas. Looking at the breathtaking view of Puget Sound from her would-be office window, Adele felt a dizzying mix of terror and exhilaration. For the first time in a decade, someone wasn't asking her to be practical, to be resilient, to survive. They were asking her to dream. She took the job. The scene at the corner spoon when she quit was more satisfying than she could have imagined. She didn't yell or make a scene. She simply walked in during Peterson's shift, handed him her apron, and said, "I resign effective immediately." Peterson, still shaken from his encounter with Nate, just nodded meekly. "Good luck to you," he mumbled, unable to meet her eye. As she walked out, she saw Martha, the elderly woman, sitting in her usual booth. Adele walked over, slipped $100 bill onto her table and whispered, "The pie is on me for the next month." The woman's grateful, tear-filled eyes were a better reward than any shouting match with her former boss. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Adele was swept up into a new reality. Her first paycheck was more money than she had seen in one place in her entire life. The first thing she did was hire a specialized home care nurse for her father, relieving the immense pressure that had been her constant companion for years. She moved her family out of their cramped apartment and into a bright, spacious condo with a view of a park, all covered by the relocation assistance in her contract. She saw her father smile, truly smile for the first time in years. She watched her brother Liam flourish, no longer burdened by guilt over his sister's sacrifice. At work, she was reborn. The artist within her, dormant for so long, awoke with a ravenous hunger. She sketched, she designed, she painted. She filled whiteboards with ideas, her creativity pouring out of her. She redesigned the foundation's logo, turning the cold corporate S of Synapse into an elegant, abstract representation of two hands reaching out to connect. It was brilliant, and Nate, upon seeing it, had simply said, "I knew it. I knew you still had it in you." Her relationship with Nate settled into a comfortable professional rhythm, though the air between them was always charged with an unspoken electricity. They had lunch together in the executive canteen, talking about art, technology, and everything in between. He was no longer the awkward boy from high school or the intimidating billionaire. He was just Nate, a man who was surprisingly lonely, incredibly brilliant, and who looked at her with a respect and admiration that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a lifetime. A fragile, tentative romance began to bloom, slow and careful, built on a foundation of shared history and newfound trust. But in the world of giants, the ground is never stable for long, and Nathaniel Harrington had enemies. The most dangerous among them was Damien Croft, the ruthless CEO of a rival tech conglomerate, Arian Systems. Croft was a corporate predator who viewed business not as competition, but as war. He had been trying for years to crack Synapse's proprietary compression algorithms with no success. Seeing Synapse flourish now with a lauded and rapidly growing philanthropic arm was salt in his wound. He watched Nate's every move, looking for a weakness, a crack in the armor. And then he found Adele. Through his own network of corporate spies, Croft learned of the Foundation's new lead concept artist. He learned of her past, her sudden hiring, her close relationship with Nate. To a man like Croft, a story of redemption looked like a vulnerability. A woman plucked from obscurity, and given everything was a woman who could be leveraged. The attack came not with a bang, but with a seductive whisper. One afternoon, Adele received an email. It wasn't to her Synapse address, but to her old personal one. It was from the Vanguard Contemporary Art Gallery, a name she'd never heard of. They claimed to be a new exclusive gallery in New York, and they had, through an anonymous art scout, been shown her old Arizdi portfolio. They were utterly captivated. They wanted to offer her a solo exhibition. It was her oldest, most deeply buried dream, handed to her on a silver platter. Her heart hammered in her chest. A solo show. In New York. She was cautious. She mentioned it to Nate over coffee. "It's probably nothing," she said, trying to downplay her excitement. "It seems too good to be true." Nate, blinded by his happiness for her, encouraged her. "Adele, it's not too good to be true. Your work is incredible. Of course, galleries will be interested. We can have our legal team look over any contracts. You should absolutely pursue this." His faith in her was so absolute, it overrode her own skepticism. She began a correspondence with a curator from the gallery named Sebastian. He was charming, knowledgeable, and effusive in his praise. They spoke on the phone, and he described the gallery space, the potential buyers, the media attention. It was everything she had ever wanted. The trap was laid with exquisite care. "To finalize the exhibition catalogue," Sebastian wrote in an email, "our design team needs your full high-resolution portfolio. I know most of it is old, but we want to show the full arc of your journey. I've attached a link to our secure gallery server. Just create a folder with your name and upload the files directly from your computer. It's encrypted end-to-end for your protection." Adele, dizzy with excitement, saw nothing wrong. It was a standard request. That evening, working late in her beautiful office at Synapse, she clicked the link. A professional-looking login portal appeared. It looked legitimate. She logged in and began uploading her art files, old sketches, ISD projects, and even some of the new concepts she was working on for the foundation. The upload was slow, taking nearly an hour. When it was done, she logged out, sent Sebastian a quick email, and went home, her mind filled with visions of her paintings hanging on a pristine white wall in a New York gallery. She had no idea what she had just done. The secure server was a Trojan horse of the highest sophistication. The link hadn't just allowed her to upload files, it had downloaded a silent, invisible program onto her computer. A program that, once the connection was severed, began to crawl through the Synapse network using her top-level security credentials. It moved like a ghost through firewalls and security protocols, heading for one target: the source code for Nate's revolutionary data compression algorithm. The crown jewels of Synapse Dynamics. The breach was detected at 3:17 a.m. by an automated security daemon Nate himself had designed. Alarms, silent and digital, blared across the network. Nate was woken by a call from his head of cybersecurity. "We have a breach, Nate. A massive one. It's an inside job." Nate was in the office in 15 minutes, his heart a cold stone in his chest. In the sterile, blue-lit security center, the evidence was laid out on a giant screen, a digital trail of breadcrumbs. The breach originated from a workstation on the 48th floor. The security chief said, his face grim. The data was exfiltrated to an untraceable server in Eastern Europe. The user credentials. They're from a senior executive in the Foundation. He typed a command, and a name appeared on the screen. Adele Bennett. Nate stared at the name, his world tilting on its axis. No, it was impossible. It was a mistake, a frame job. It had to be. "Check her logs. Check her computer activity." Nate ordered, his voice strained. They did. And the evidence was damning. The login to the unknown server, the massive data transfer that coincided exactly with the time of the breach. The origin point was, without a shadow of a doubt, her computer using her credentials. To the system, and to anyone looking at it, it was an open and shut case of corporate espionage. The company's protocol for a breach of this magnitude was brutal and immediate, termination, legal action, federal involvement. His board of directors, when they were notified, would be screaming for her head on a platter. Nate stood in the silent security center, the glowing screens reflecting in his horrified eyes. He was standing at a precipice. On one side was Synapse Dynamics, the empire he had built, from nothing his life's work now critically wounded. On the other side was Adele, the woman he had pulled from the ashes, the woman he was falling in love with, the woman who, according to every piece of evidence, had just betrayed him in the most devastating way imaginable. His heart told him she was innocent, but the data, his God, his language, the foundation of his entire world, told him she was a traitor. And he had to make a choice. Nate stood in the cold, blue-lit security center, the data screaming Adele's guilt. Every protocol demanded he cut her out, notify the authorities, and treat her as a hostile agent. The board was already demanding action, but Nate's mind replayed her face, the weary kindness in the diner, the resurrected hope in her new office. The data was absolute, but his intuition was a powerful dissenting voice. He made his choice. "Lock down the network," Nate commanded, his voice dangerously calm. "This investigation stays in-house for 24 hours under my personal authority. No one escalates. Understood?" The security chief simply nodded. Nate bypassed his car instead, taking a Ducati motorcycle from the garage. He needed the roar of the engine to silence the doubt in his head as he raced through the city to the condo building he had helped her secure, a fact that now felt like a bitter irony. He knocked. Adele opened the door, her face radiant with a joy that struck him like a physical blow. "Nate, you won't believe it. The gallery sent the contract." She beamed, gesturing to her family celebrating inside. The sight of their innocent joy solidified his resolve. "Adele," he said, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. "We need to talk, alone." On the balcony, the festive sounds from inside faded. "Nate, what is it?" she asked, her smile faltering. He had to be direct. "The gallery, Adele. It isn't real. At 9:15 p.m. last night, as you uploaded your portfolio, a Trojan horse on their server stole the source code for our core algorithm. My entire company was compromised, and your digital signature is on every part of it." The color drained from her face as the words connected her dream, curdling into a nightmare. "What? No. It was a solo show," she stammered, stumbling back against the railing. The realization hit her with full force. "It was a lie," she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "The gallery. None of it was real." Her devastation was absolute. It was not the face of a person caught, but of a soul shattered by the knowledge that her own dream had been weaponized against the man who gave it back to her. "Oh God, Nate, what have I done?" she sobbed. Seeing her utter genuine despair, Nate knew. The data could go to hell. He believed her. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firming, taking her shoulders. "I need you to think. Anything strange about the upload? Anything at all?" She shook her head, her mind a blur of panic, then paused. "Liam, my brother. He glanced at the link yesterday. He said something." She called her brother to the balcony. "Liam, the gallery link. What did you say about it?" "Just that it was a weird port protocol for a simple upload," Liam said, concerned. "Masked to look secure, but routed through a non-standard channel. I figured it was just some quirky server host. Why? It was the crack Nate needed, the single flaw in a perfect frame job. "Liam," Nate said, his mind racing, "you're coming with me." He looked at Adele, his eyes now blazing with the fire of war. "Stay here, lock the door, talk to no one, I will handle this." For the next 18 hours, Nate's office became a command center. while his investigator Arthur Gable confirmed that Vanguard Gallery was a ghost entity. Nate and Liam dissected the Trojan. It was designed to erase itself, but they found what they were looking for, a single unwiped string of code, a digital signature. It belongs to a cyber mercenary group known as Nyx. Liam breathed, his eyes wide. Arthur didn't have to check his files. Nyx is on Damien Croft's unofficial payroll. That was the smoking gun. But proving Adele's innocence wasn't enough. Nate needed to end the war. He expects me to be in chaos, tearing my company apart, Nate said, a brilliant, audacious plan forming. We'll use his arrogance against him. Nate and Liam weaponized the hacker's own methods, creating a honeypot, a data file named Synapse Project, Ethelred, final algorithm key. They planted it deep within Damien Croft's own R&D network, making it look like the ultimate prize leaked by one of Croft's own people. The trap was sprung in less than 3 hours. Damien Croft, arrogant and greedy, took the bait. The moment he tried to access the file from his personal terminal, it triggered a silent alarm to a dedicated FBI cybercrime unit and simultaneously deployed a logic bomb, systematically corrupting every server on his R&D network. Federal agents stormed his office, catching him red-handed. Croft could only watch in horror as decades of his own company's research turned into digital dust. It was a corporate assassination of unparalleled elegance. Checkmate. The next morning, Nate held a press conference publicly exonerating Adele and announcing a new cybersecurity division at Synapse to be co-headed by Liam Bennett. Weeks later, the storm had passed. The Synapse Foundation held its grand reopening, its new brand a wild success. The centerpiece of the gallery was a large, breathtaking painting by Adele. It depicted a swirling vortex of dark, chaotic colors resolving into brilliant, warm light. She called it "The Ghost in the Machine." Nate stood beside her, the crowds around them fading to a hum. "All the data in the world told me you were guilty," he said softly. "But I chose to believe you." Adele turned to him, her eyes clear and full of a love that had been forged in fire. "And I chose to trust that you would," she replied. He took her hand. It was not the hand of a billionaire and the waitress he saved. It was the hand of his partner. They had faced the storm and emerged into the light stronger and finally together. And there you have it, a story that began in the shadows of a rainy night and ended in the bright light of truth. It's a powerful reminder that a person's true worth is never defined by their job or their circumstances, but by their character, their resilience, and their heart. It shows us that true trust isn't about believing when all the evidence makes sense. It's about believing when none of it does. Nathaniel and Adele's journey wasn't just about second chances. It was about fighting for the truth and building a future on a foundation stronger than any lie. What would you have done in Nate's position? Would you have trusted the data or your heart? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who loves a story of justice and redemption, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas. Thank you for listening.